Thanks for the intro. Yes, this has been a panel that has been billed as whole plant versus synthetic. It's the topic that I'll tell you a story. So in November, I was invited to Vegas to speak on one of the shows, and I was talking about Israel's position on how we're looking at R&D in cannabis, how we're looking at the medicalization, the monetization. I didn't say as much, but I very much clearly was giving the wrong message. The audience were quiet. And I was explaining that I don't see a difference between, or a reason that it's whole plant or synthetic. I don't understand why we need to look at both of these cannabinoid therapies as mutually exclusive. In Nevada, and in California, there's a big movement for whole plant only. So really, this is my opportunity to show from our side, and Constance, I think she's sitting here a little bit scared, thinking we're going to bombard her, saying Big Pharma. We're not all about Big Pharma. We're about getting good, working medicine into the hands of patients that need it. And more importantly, creating medicines that doctors can prescribe. Because this is the challenge right now, not just knowing that things work and doing the studies, but if we want our health insurance companies to pay for cannabis, for doctors to prescribe it, it has to go through and has to be FDA approved. Now, Big Pharma have expertise in this, they have vested interest, but what I want to present today really is how we can maybe work together for the best of all patients. So I want to let each of you introduce yourselves, what you do with your companies, how you view cannabis therapies through your company's eyes. Constance, would you like to kick us off? Pick up the mic.
So is this on? Yes?
I can hear you.
All right, I think he's asking the sacrificial lamb to go first. So we're kind of known for whole plant extracts in California. I'm Constance Finley, and my company is called Constance Therapeutics. We've been in existence since 2008, and when we started doing this, there wasn't really much alternative other than whole plant. But we have a bias, and I think that bias comes partially from personal experience and philosophy of science, as well as our observations and what we've learned as we've gone along in these past 9 years. So we tried to focus on meeting the needs that weren't met in California at that time, because I was trying to save my own life. And I wasn't very happy buying something that I didn't know where it came from. I was aware of Hazekamp's work showing 60% of the strains are not what the grower thinks they are, et cetera, et cetera. So we aimed for the space in between traditional pharmaceuticals and what was practiced commonly in the medicinal cannabis market, which was at that time called medical marijuana, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Thank you. My name is Ascher Shmulevitz. I'm the chairman of Therapix Biosciences. We're publicly listed in Tel Aviv, and hopefully this week we'll uplist to NASDAQ. So we'll be the first Israeli cannabis-related company going public on NASDAQ. I'm sorry. I'm a physician, MD, PhD, serial entrepreneur, and I'm the chairman of Therapix. We're focused on developing a drug. I'm frankly agnostic of what the source of the cannabinoid is, synthetic or botanical or herbal. But I do think you have to do it right, and our goal is to develop a drug going down the FDA path.
Hi, I'm Malcolm Kavarana. I'm a senior director at Teewinot Life Sciences. It's a biopharmaceutical company that's located in Tampa, Florida. And we use synthetic biology. Using a proprietary process, we've actually manufactured 20 independent cannabinoid compounds. Like Ascher, I think there's a place for botanical extracts, but I also do believe that there's a place for pharmaceutical grade cannabinoids, where you have single independent compounds that can be characterized, reproduced, and scaled for dosing purposes. That could serve the pharmaceutical market.
I want to go straight to Ascher, back to Ascher. I think Ascher might be our sacrificial lamb. The fear, I think, of synthetics is not so much synthetics itself, it's the relationship or the correlation in the perception of synthetics equals big pharma. Big pharma equals corruption and nasty, nasty bad things when big pharma do anything. How do you, when someone says to you, aren't you just, aren't you feeding the lion by, like, why not just focus on botanical? Like, it's already there, we know it works, why not just focus on botanical? Why start messing around in the lab? How would you answer that?
Well, I think in general the cannabis market, if you want, will right now is a niche market. It's a growing market, but still a niche market, and there is no dominant player both on the recreational side or the pharmaceutical side. My assumption is that with time that will change. The tobacco industry calls cannabis the new tobacco, so they're going to go into this as soon as it's worthwhile for them to go and build a national brand. So I think you can't keep them out of the industry, and the same is true for the pharmaceutical industry. As an entrepreneur, my goal is to develop the best product I can with limited resources, but to say that the big companies will not go into this industry, I think is wishful thinking, but it's not going to happen. I think they will go into this. Both sides of the industry will have large corporate companies coming in and building national brands. That's my take of it. So I think trying to prevent that from happening is a lost cause.
So you're saying the reality is big pharma's going nowhere. So
I think big pharma. So let me just step back a second. The reason I got into cannabis, and I actually was one of the first people investing in cannabinoids. I started investing in 2007. Was because in my mind.
So can I pause you for a second and give full disclosure to the audience of what it is that you do? I'm not sure you mentioned it specifically. Ascher's company Therapix is working with Marinol,
yes,
which probably has the worst reputation. I hear boos and hisses, and there may be some tomatoes being picked up. Can I ask you specifically why, of all the synthetic molecules, of all anything you could do on that side, why Marinol when you hear the boos and hisses?
Well, the only cannabinoid that was approved as a drug in the U.S. is Marinol or dronabinol, the generic. That's the only drug that was approved by the FDA in 1986, based on Rafi Mishulam's discovery in 1963. Unfortunately, it's a bad drug, and it's a bad drug because the formulation is bad. It has very low bioavailability. You could argue if the API manufacturing is a good process or a bad process. It's a very expensive process, so it's a very expensive drug, and so it never became a blockbuster drug. But it's the only drug that was ever approved by the FDA that is a cannabis-related drug. CBD has never been approved yet. It's on the fast track of getting approval. GW is doing a good job, I think, of getting that approved. But the reason we chose THC, synthetic THC, was because it's the only API that has been approved as a drug in the U.S.
So it's bootstrapping to cut corners, to make it cheaper for you to.
I'm saying, so we're entrepreneurial and we're Israeli, so we have to do it in a very cash-efficient way. But I think THC as a bioactive is very interesting. It could be sourced from a plant or biosynthetic, like you guys are doing.
So I'm going to cut you off right there because I wanted to jump to Malcolm. Is biosynthetic is that as simple as it sounds? It's like a middle way between botanical and synthetic.
Well, it definitely reduces the manufacturing time, and it definitely is very cost-effective. So what we do is we've engineered yeast cells to actually express the protein cannabinoid synthase, whether it's THCA synthase or CBD synthase, and the protein is expressed outside the cell. We take the enzyme, and then we feed the enzyme with synthetically manufactured CBGA or CBGVA, which we have now developed a process that makes it very cost efficiently. The enzyme catalyzes the formation of the cannabinoid. We separate it out, And we can currently produce, kilo scale levels of 20 different compounds for at a very good price point, I think. So in that regard, where the FDA is looking at a company to provide a single molecule in a reproducible way at a particular dose, this technology provides those advantages. Synthetically, chemically synthesized cannabinoids can do that also, but it's just a little bit more pricier, we believe.
And biosynthetic is more stable?
It's a very reproducible technology. It's the natural enzyme that does its job. Instead of doing it in a plant, it's doing it in a bioreactor. So it produces the same compound. We've tested the compound by NMR, LCMS, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen content analysis, elemental analysis, and a variety of other ways. And we have no doubt that for example, THC has 2 chiral centers, so it provides 2 enantiomers. We make 1 enantiomer, the active one. CBD has 2 chiral centers of 4 distereomers, actually, and we can make each of those separately.
How do you correlate what we know about entourage effect? When you're creating individual molecules, it's expensive synthetic, it's cheaper biosynthetic, you're still playing with an abacus. And this is I think, the biggest argument for whole plant, that we still don't know enough. And besides which, in pharma, for FDA approval, we're talking 7 years, 10 years per indication.
True.
Okay, so how do we? Okay, so the botanical is potentially, if we talk about the number of indications that cannabis can treat, what we know about, and try and predict how long it's going to take for big pharma, even Teva, who do amazing stuff with generics. It's a long time before we get to the point where, in the ideal world, doctors can write their prescriptions. And okay, so in the meantime, what do we do?
Well, big pharma, you can definitely accelerate the process at the FDA. You can have fast-track approvals at the FDA. With the new administration coming in, there's a lot of talk about getting the FDA to move faster than it usually does. I think one of the advantages of having the ability to produce independent compounds is that you could formulate them in very specific ratios. You're talking of the entourage effect, where 2 or more substances, what we call in medicinal chemistry as synergistic effects, the effect that's promoted by 2 combined substances is greater than each individual substance. That can be very easily formulated. So I think there are a lot of advantages to producing independent compounds. The FDA approval process can be fast-tracked, particularly if you're going after orphan disease indications. You could definitely get an accelerated program over there.
I want to jump to Constance and learn more about how you create your formulations, or how strains are chosen per indication when patients, because right now, as I say, doctors can't prescribe, but we're working on anecdotal patient evidence, sharing of knowledge, accumulation of knowledge, and therefore we can advise.
So in California, it's a little bit different because doctors have been recommending now since 1996. And
okay, let me interrupt you there because I'm not American. What's the difference between going to your doctor and being recommended something and going to your doctor and being
prescribing?
It means
so
they're covered.
It's based on which pad they use. Okay. So the FDA pad, which doesn't limit a doctor's ability to later prescribe Schedule I substances, in California they write a recommendation, so they're not breaking a federal law.
That's you right. Something's written.
Yes, it is written, and unfortunately, most of the doctors have absolutely no knowledge whatsoever of the endocannabinoid system or of cannabis or how to use it. So I was faced with exactly that problem, with a very, very serious illness, and we attempted to solve that problem, to try to stand in between the doctors and the California patients until the doctors were properly informed. So we do a lot of doctor education, and what we have done over the past 9 years actually is fairly respected among the doctors that we work with, some of them internationally known. So we feel that to standardize what is available now in the medicinal state is an act not only of compassion, but also of science. And so we've done the best job that we could do in the gray area of both working with known genetics, trying to preserve the black box that created these magic results that everybody started talking about. And by that, what I mean is that the first oncologist who sent me patients in California announced 3 years later that he had a 96% cessation of cancer activity in stage 4 second occurrence patients after they went through a 3.5-month protocol with us. They were referred and followed by him. And he says that 3 years later, that same population was 76% still alive. So what I was given was an absolute serendipitous discovery. I had no intention of ever doing this. I was trying to get myself out of my house and out of being an invalid. And it was doctors that said, we want you to try this. So I feel like it was as valid and as scientific as we were able to do at that time, and we've just continued to take it as seriously as possible and to offer patients access to standardize by weight with known genetics. We're, 3/4 of the way through ISO 9000 standards for pharmaceuticals. We have 3 patents. 2 of them have been issued, and they're on our process and compounding. And we take it as seriously as we're able to do in that space, and I genuinely believe that there's a very legitimate place for serious practitioners of whole plant cannabis therapeutics. I have friends in biosynthesis, and back when we were talking about perhaps CBD could be a miraculous answer for Ebola, right? And so I looked at Kevin Chen and I said, okay, you could boost like crazy my whole plant extract. We could be active very, very fast with your technology and my inventory. So I don't see any fight up here, honestly. I hope to bring my own standardized protocols through FDA approval. We're approached by researchers, and I would not abandon what I do if right now in California, if that became true, because I think there's legitimacy in all 3 areas. Medicinal cannabis informed from herbal synergistic principles. Also, I think there's a real place for cannabis in the nutraceutical market as well as in the FDA-approved regulatory process. And if I can just say one other aspect, the entourage effect, and we speak a lot about it. I'm a huge fan of Ethan Russo's. He's a fan of our work as well, privately at least. And what we find in the herbalism world is it often isn't just 2 compounds. It can be as many as 20 or 25. And when you take the one magic substance, and I use that word very loosely here, when you take the one substance that is triggering all the others out, you can have 19 inert ingredients. So I think until we know all of that, and that's our job, I think it's all of our job is to find that out. To be here and to hear Dr. Maori, and also I apologize for the name of the doctor from Volcani. This is the kind of stuff that I fantasized about being able to do when the doctor said 96% cancer-free. That would have been the immediate thing to do.
You're right. It's amazing. I've had a few conversations this morning and talking about personalized medicine and how cannabis, because of the complexity of the cannabinoids that we're learning about, cannabis might be finally the vehicle that creates that platform for personalized medicine. I'm sitting here listening, and when I know myself in the industry, we know that certain terpene profiles, we know certain strains with DNA profiles, and our own human genetic profile should create a situation where we know exactly dosing. Not like in the pharma world right now, 20 milligrams of XYZ, same for every patient, morning, evening. Real personalized medicine, which could be printed or biosynthesized very quickly. I guess this is the world of dreams. The question is right now, I want to pull this back because the conversation keeps coming up about how we get access to the medicine. And I think you hit the nail on the head about having this additional cannabis therapeutic path. I've been saying it for a little while. I don't want my doctor to prescribe cannabis right now. I don't want, I do, of course I do, but the reality is it's risky. And Yuval Landschaft and the plan we're doing in Israel, it's a beautiful model. I do fear for a little bit for the risks of putting doctors under a situation where they're prescribing medicine that does not have FDA approval. I think it's dangerous. I think there's risks. I think it has to be implemented slowly, and I think it will. But bridging that gap between, I love the fact in America they can prescribe and they can recommend. Maybe that is the exact model that we need. One where the doctor's insured, and one where the doctor is not insured, but happy to give you access. I want to open up maybe some questions, if anybody in the audience wants to ask any of our guests.
I just want to kind of draft off of where you were in the conversation and talk about side effects of each of the kind of compounds or synthetics or non-synthetics that you're using. So maybe Ascher first, side effects of Marinol, and then,
Sure. So first of all, I'm a big believer in the entourage effect. My partner, Rafi Meshulam, discovered the entourage the effect. And frankly, when he published it, it was about the endocannabinoid system. It wasn't about the plant. People forget it, but it was really about several molecules that never saw the plant. So the entourage effect happens in biology in general, and it's basically multi-targeted approach to therapy. I'm not necessarily a believer that there is a silver bullet. I think the pharmaceutical industry is understanding that a multi-target approach is safer in many ways. That was one of the issues with several of the drugs that were very potent, but also very toxic because they were too specific and had major side effects. So THC alone has benefits. It has some also some negative aspects to it. We believe in doing it right, right formulation, the right combination. We are working on our own entourage approach of two synthetics. But as I said, the API could be a synthetic, or you're sourcing from a biosynthetic or from a plant. So, but I do believe that we should be looking at multi-target. So I'm a big believer in multi-target, and I think the pharmaceutical industry is going in that direction anyhow. So that's I think where we should be focused on.
Have you not kind of concluded that there are specific side effects to Marinol, or are there not?
So the problem with Marinol specifically is that it was a bad formulation. The bioavailability of the active ingredient is only 5%. So 95% of the active ingredient goes somewhere. We don't know where it goes, and that's the problem. So, someone at a conference several years ago asked Rafi Meshulam, what's better, synthetic or biologic? And his answer was, you have to do it right. And if you do it right, it doesn't matter. So our goal is to do it right. So I think bioavailability is important. The advantage of using some of these terpenes and other molecules together with the active is that it enhances the bioavailability, and that's where I think the entourage effect comes in.
Okay. Malcolm, as far as your studies and side effects or non-side effects, have you experienced any with the research that you've done, or none?
We're a small company, so we're just kind of starting to look at some of these unique cannabinoids that we've been producing. Many of these are actually present in plants at less than 1%. We've done a couple of cellular studies as well as receptor binding studies to see how different these cannabinoids are in modulating the CB1, CB2 receptor. We've been able to come up with molecules that actually have better half-lives, that have better hepatic stability. So that's the indication for not having, it's a good indication in the sense that it's not going to be cleared quickly by the first pass effect. As Ascher said, only 5% of Marinol is actually available for therapeutic purposes. My guess is a bulk of the remaining amount that's administered is probably just gutted out through the liver through the first pass effect. Formulation is another area that we've been focusing on. These are highly hydrophobic compounds, and getting them into a formulation that's suitable for that is mainly aqueous, for oral delivery or as injectables is going to be very important, and I think specific formulations of these compounds will help to improve the availability of these compounds biologically.
I'm coming to you in the front row. Just want to give Constance a chance to talk about side effects that she's encountered.
So we have one famous internationally known oncologist who referred to our regime as cannabinoid chemotherapy because he insisted that patients do it at full bore. And the reason that I developed the cannabis coaching model that's widely used now in the medicinal community in California is because the side effects are very hard to manage. I myself didn't want to be high, but I found that if I didn't incorporate large amounts of THC in a nightly regime, that I didn't have a cessation of inflammation. I couldn't get out of the house. So we found a lot of surprising things, and we feel that helping a cannabis-naive population, generally an older population in severe distress, out of options, we had to hold their hands. And so we learned how to do that, to introduce people to a very gradual attenuation process. And if, of course, terminality was, if their doctors were pushing them to do it faster, we helped them to do that. We think that whole plant ameliorates some of the worst effects of THC, but CBD at a low level actually potentiates THC and its psychoactivity. So we've learned a lot as we go forward, and what we have found is that there are no permanent harm that result, and that makes us a lot more brave to help people if they choose to do this in order to change, their disease pattern.
I just want to make sure I heard you right. I'm right up here. As far as what I think I heard you say was managing someone's cannabis naivete.
Exactly.
Okay.
We
What's
don't
your
have
question?
a single recreational user, and we dealt with a very aged, very sick population.
Okay. But no long-standing, just kind of getting people used to the plant type of thing.
Pardon?
Getting
No.
people used to the plant is what you had to do.
Well, what we did is we made the first potent extracts that had been seen in California, as high as 72% CBD, as high as 82% THC. So we were taking people to very high levels.
Yeah.
A gram
Right
a
off the
night.
bat.
Well,
That's like being Mario Andretti if
Gradually.
you never drove a car.
gradually up as fast as we could. And
Right.
we kind of learned that clinically just
Yeah.
by practicing it. And the advantage of whole plant is that it doesn't slam the receptors as hard. You're not going to die, at least. We may have people throwing up. We have about 800 people in Northern California a year that spend an outrageous sum of money to go to the emergency room because they think they're dying because they ate an edible, right? It really truly happens. But with the coaching, you can get people to do it very, very successfully.
Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so first of all, let me just make it clear. I don't think, even if you take THC, pure THC, in any formulation, it has a lethal dose, as opposed to any other drug that I'm aware of, including water. There's water intoxication. You could die from just drinking too much water.
It was proven at the Hebrew University that it is impossible to overdose.
Exactly.
from
So
THC.
even with the pure THC, at any dose that you'll take, you're not going to die from it. So one of the first things that we're taught in medical school is do no harm. So I don't think we're doing harm by giving even pure THC. I do think that the dose is very important.
Absolutely.
We found that certain doses actually do the opposite of what the patient expects to get out of the drug. And that's where the doctor is very nervous about prescribing a drug. The THC at a certain level can cause psychosis.
Sure.
If you give it to children, it could cause increase in psychosis, and we see that. So it's very important as a physician to know what you're giving, what the dose is. Are you giving it to the right drug to the right patient?
I think I just want to add is what's most important. I think Saul mentioned it this morning in his opening remarks. Is normalization. I don't believe the science, the research, the lobbying should be in the realm of just, the Californian culture movement. I think right now we are in a period of normalization. Normalization means that anyone from a geneticist to a biosynthetic, sorry, I'm not sure what your job title exactly is, but throughout the life sciences value chain through to investors, it's just a plant.
Yeah.
It's a plant that needs to be understood. It's a medicine that needs to be researched. There's a lot of things that needs to be normalized. Even side effects. There's nothing that doesn't have side effects. We need to learn them, understand them, and tweak. And I would like to hear from this lady.
Absolutely.
Hi, it's Dr. Ely again. I wanted to ask Malcolm, you said you had 20 compounds, and are all 20 of those cannabinoids, or are some of those terpenoids or flavonoids?
No, they're all cannabinoids.
They're all cannabinoids. And,
Yes.
and do they all have a face that relates to the plant cannabinoids?
Yes. We have a one-to-one correspondence with what's in the plant. So we have the cannabinoids, we have the variant series, and then we have some of the oxidized products of THC like CBN, oxidized product of CBCA, which is CBL. We have them, we can make them individually, and we have the technology to scale it up to kilo-scale labs, whether it's CGMP or just regular.
But if you wanted to employ the entourage effect that's present in the whole plant,
Correct.
would your next idea be to synthesize the terpenoids that we know are active in the entourage effect?
We are considering that. We are only a 15% company, so resources are limited. I am the scientist in the company. We actually do most of our manufacturing and research through a CRO, but we provide them with the technology and the guidance to do that. We've been looking into that. At this stage, we are more focused on looking at how we can manufacture a couple of more of the cannabinoids that are generally found in the plants, particularly the ones that are at very low levels in the plant tissue. That's the focus at the moment, but as we move forward, we will definitely be looking at how do we combine either independent cannabinoid compounds with terpenes or flavonoids to kind of simulate, if you will, the effect that you see from a plant extract, for a particular disease indication. It has to be for a particular disease indication.
My name is Dr. Joseph Morgan. I want to thank all of you. You all make a great contribution. And I have
applause for that, right? That's a positive thing. There you go.
And I have a patent pending on adding terpenes back to cannabinoids, both synthetic as well as natural. I've already filed the patent, and it's already pending. U.S. Patent Office. It's filed in Israel, the EU, and multiple other locations. And there's room for everybody because the Food and Drug Administration likes single active pharmaceutical ingredient drugs. Very easy to do double-blinded studies. But cannabis is not, and so all of you have a great role, and we're all going to be seeing amazing therapeutic results. So
there we go.
Thank you.
All right, not so much a question, but a very positive statement.
Could I respond to the other
Okay,
question?
here we go. State your name and your question.
Hi, my name is Brad. I just had a quick question to the group that's synthesizing the 20 cannabinoids. Are you giving these to patients, and how do they respond to these formulations you're creating?
We haven't actually gone into patients. We are still in using cell lines and receptor binding studies. We haven't really put it in a patient population as of yet.
There's an interesting story I have friends in biosynthesis, and they approached me I think now 3 years ago, asking to replicate my extracts in total. And of course, my patent attorneys went nuts, and my people, the nutraceuticals, said, no, you can't risk it. But we looked at seriously, I think you make a really great point. There's over 400 active compounds in this. How can we get to the point that we can replicate that from any other maneuvering very soon?
But once we know what formulation, what profile, what list, what recipe, we need them. It's a very simple race of scalability. How quickly can we replicate that? How quickly, how cheaply, how safely, to a point that doctors can prescribe it? But we're all pro-choice.
There we go.
If that's the right expression.
We're also very interested in boosts.
In boost?
Boosting with your minor cannabinoids, putting them in whole plant extracts.
Once we know, it's just a race to scaling.
There we
Scale for
go.
the planet.
You want to do final questions, final comments from the panel?
Well, I just wanted to add that I think there is room for everyone. one of the opportunities that I think will be created is products that are complementary to cannabis, cannabinoids. Some of these molecules that you mentioned, the terpenes, are really found in other plants. There's no reason not to develop them as nutraceuticals that would be complementary to the cannabis industry. And so I think we'll see a growth of multiple industries that are complementary to each other.
I agree. Malcolm?
Yeah, I kind of echo Ascher's thoughts. I think there's definitely room for nutraceuticals, for people who are going to be making compounds through chemical synthesis, as well as people like us who use synthetic biology to make compounds. Each of these complements the other. You cannot start making compounds through chemical synthesis without actually identifying them through plant extracts and stuff like that. That's the way traditional drug discovery has been done. And synthetic biology is even newer than chemical synthesis. So there's definitely room for each of these.
Needs to be worked. Constance?
I'm glad I'm not the sacrificial lamb. My closing comment would be that we have learned, and there's many other experts in cannabis that have learned, that, for instance, it doesn't function as a milligram per kilogram, at least in a whole plant extract. So that's something that the pharmaceutical industry isn't used to working with, and I think it's a big challenge. And I think it lends some legitimacy to the customized medicine approach of whole plant extracts. But I'm happy to be in this scientific company. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Constance. I just want to say before we finish up, thank you all for coming, and I want to leave you with a thought. We live in a world where we keep saying, best of health to everyone, and we ideally would like to be in a utopia where we never need to go to the doctor. If I ate healthy, if I ate lots of fruit and vegetables, and if I went running like my wife said I should, and if all these things that we should do, that we know we should do better, then I might never, ever need to go to my doctor. And please God, by all of us, but when we do, I'll say it again, when I go to my doctor, I want them to prescribe me some horrible little white pill produced by some horrible big pharma company. Now, I don't need to. This is the beauty of cannabis. The beauty of cannabis, I can say, okay, you want to give me that? No, I'll just go and get my natural bud, shatter, I don't know, whatever it might be, capsules, patches. I don't need, and we have a choice. And we've never had this before with a medicine where you can go to a doctor and get the nasty big pharma, or you can get very good, tastier, smellier, nicer medicine from your local dispensary. And there is room for all of us. The goal is that we should all have the choice to choose whether we want to go big pharma, not big pharma, whether we want our health insurance to pay for it or not pay for it, whether we want to cook it ourselves or not. I think, did you want to have a last word?
Do we have time for a joke? Because
Of course.
Of course. It's the end of the day.
So I used to live in Seattle, and we had a neighbor. He was a physician, and he knew that I was very entrepreneurial and started these companies. And he said that he was Jewish, and he said he wanted to become a rabbi. I said, why do you want to become a rabbi? He said, well, because I'm not making money. I'm just not enjoying medicine like I thought I would. I'm very spiritual. I want to help people. I'm going to become a rabbi. So 2 years later, I see him. He's really happy. I said, Gary, what happened? Did you become a rabbi? He said, no, I started selling nutraceuticals.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to Clifton and the panelists. I think we made that a very positive affair. So thank you so much for all of your mind
Thank you very much,
power.
everyone.